generation are we going to give? To understand biblical prophecy, just like the difficult texts in the Bible, we need to follow the principle of the preceding texts. It's the beginning of the present text. Because in the preceding texts, we find a principle of interpreting words. It's called the analogy of expressions that connects what happened before with what could happen next. So, in the freebie, DP means rapendo, and issue about Lyoset. We don't give that title to anyone else. We reserve it for our master, Privi Roberto, Mia Shohan Bar Yosef, from the royal house of the Nabi, prophesied that there is a generation that cannot escape. Before all these prophetic things he had mentioned came true, let's try to put his words in context, both in Ner chapter 13 and in Hillel chapter 21, as well as in Matthew chapter 24. The teacher is speaking about how things will be in the generation that has the honor to see the numbering of Matthias Benafides. And among the things he mentions, without being exhaustive, we can highlight the following. First, wars and conflicts practically everywhere on the planet. If the king predicted there will be wars, more guapas, rumors of heroes, it was also said that behind the flashes and that natural disasters will come. Yes, I recorded that in the context of Andorunas, earthquakes in various places. I mean, impressive and powerful changes from Bepik. That's what he's announcing. And also, he prophesied that the followers of his followers, the followers of Uribe, were persecuted. We would be practically hated by all nations because we would be ourselves. And this is good news for us. Smile, for he longs for it. We will be the greatest obstacles that on their path will have those who want to destroy this world. Therefore, the students and followers of the Kribi we will be defending their cause, right? That we will fight for his cause, that we will fight for the cause of his name. We will be the target of the conflict. The PRI also mentioned a very interesting event that he called the abomination of desolation. The desolating illumination is related to a plan for the destruction of Jezebel, like it happened during the time of the Maccabees, where the prophet Daniel anticipated such desolation. And then I managed to develop it almost to the letter with those terrible actions we know, and so did Antilogopifax. The Reap also mentions a great persecution of a great tribulation. That intense age that brought its words, never before in human history. The same thing would have happened. And it also mentions changes and alterations at a cosmic level. I passed the idea of signs in the sun, signs in the moon, signs in the stars. Finally, and here comes the octopus. Finally, the Riva mentions that Herod, after saying all that, It's just that Jerusalem will be under rule again, controlling the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is over. Only after all of this, or only after all this, really claims that they will see the Son of Man. The Son of Man was a figure prophetic, referring to Maseo ben David. After all that, you will see the Mashiach ben David, the Son of Man, the Ben Hadar, reveal himself in Israel in the clouds. About Jerusalem, with great power and glory, the Son of Man, the King of Allah, is Masao of the dominion, and it is in that context and no other. It's in that context, it was in that context that he added, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Logically, he couldn't be referring to his own generation, but to the generation that begins to see these things. They want to seduce that generation. The generation that starts seeing all these things is the one that endures. So our teacher speaks of that generation that will not pass away. The one that sees these things that have been mentioned as necessary. A word for the breakthrough of Messias ben David. And the last thing from the list he mentioned is the gentle rule over the holy city of Jerusalem. In other words, the generation that sees the conclusion of the gentle rule over Jerusalem, that is the generation that will not pass away. The question is, which generation is that? Is there any way to know this? What is that relationship? Could it be our generation? This generation will be something still distant in time of us. To answer this question, we have to look into the Hebrew scriptures and the scriptures about him. What earthly time period is included in a generation? In a prophetic generation, what earthly time? It spans a prophetic generation, because it's not just any generation. It's a prophetic generation. So we have to seek out, excuse me, we need to find out how much earth time a prophetic generation spans. Meaning, one of the generations that is closely connected with the redeeming acts from the sin. The present redemptive that we have in the Bible, the prophetic precedent of terrestrial time that we have in the Hebrew Bible. It's related to the promise of the Exodus from Egypt. That's the only textual precedent we have in the Hebrew scriptures. In other words, the promise that Abraham's descendants would be enslaved in a foreign land. It is mentioned in the book, First of Our Power, in the book of Genesis, in the Hebrew Bible, and specifically it is found in chapter 15 of the book of Genesis, where the blood covenant is discussed, or of the covenant between the parties who do that with our father Abraham, Navi. I'm going to read for you what Genesis chapter 15 verse 13 says. Then the eternal book opened. You must know that your descendants will live as foreigners in a land that does not belong to them. it will be unlocked. It will be a pleasure to deal with them. For 400 years, I will punish the nation they serve, and afterward, your descendants, that is the children of Israel, your descendants will leave that place with great wealth. That is one of the promises of the covenant between the guidelines. And until the next episode, is it included in the covenant to do that with Mabasha? And it is in that alliance that he is promised to be blessed and made into a great nation. Well, there is a reference to slavery in Egypt. And it is stated that the duration 400 years come to pass with the biblical account we have in the book of Exodus of the people of Israel being enslaved in Egypt, followed by the Exodus led by Mozart, Avelo, when we sent oaths to take them out of Egypt, an event we all know as the Exodus. Now then, this prophecy that has come from within the covenant with Abraham, that they included something very interesting. And in the next chapter, after having said the previous, he adds the following. Genesis 15 and 16. And in the fourth generation, it will come back here. It is the fourth relationship. They will come back here. Because until then, the wickedness will not have reached its peak of the flavorings, of the caramel candies. This promise, remember, took place in the context of the covenant of the parts. The covenant of Sanchez. I don't have time to explain that now. I look at the animals were sacrificed. Parts of them were placed on each side. You would walk down the middle, make promises and such, and if not, the punishment was death. Like the animals that were dead there. Well, it is mentioned here that the children of Israel will be slaves in Egypt for 4 generations. It will only be in the 4th generation, which we know as the generation of Moses, the one who left Egypt. Logically, if they had been in Egypt for 400 years, and in the 4th generation, a prophetic generation would then return after 100 years, because 400 years divided by 4 equals grains. Therefore, if Yeshua said that the generation that experiences these things would not pass, it would be speaking of another nation that would follow 7 years after the conclusion of the time of the Gentiles. So, how many have already eaten? Well, that put it a bit far, didn't it? Away from things. Because, yes, in what year did Jerusalem officially stop being dominated by the remnants of the Israelites? All right. As much as possible for Chan. In 67, the eastern part was conquered. But it wasn't until 1980 that the United Capital was declared. It's possible the 100 years after 1980, while they place us on Sunday the 7th. What year is it? It's 2024. How many years do we have left? When there was none left, well, there it goes. How much? 660, 660. When our kids are born and turn 66 years old, let it be so. We won't be here anymore. None of us. Well, maybe one of us will. I think so. It was 6 years, or I was in bad shape, huh? This whole battle right now, that's a tricky alternative. But there's something happening here that we can't forget, and it's the following. Certainly the children of Israel were in Egypt for 400 years, but out of those 400 years, only 200 were of slavery. Only 200 years were of slavery. We had a great first 200 years in the United States. He spent the first 12 years having a great time in New York. Yes, there we were, legal residents, happy, prosperous. We had no problems. Yes, first of all, I'm sorry, it's only after 4 generations of being enslaved that he has returned. So this introduces us to another scenario today. To another scenario, the problem. Let's see this other scenario completely. If 200 years of tribulations and slavery in Egypt are 4 generations, because in the 4th generation they wouldn't know, dividing 200 by 4 gives us an idea of what a productive generation means. Bertolo from the Adranic Pact. From 2 snakes there are 4 or 4 times. 4, yes, 4, okay? Oh God, is 50 years. Based on this discovery, if 1 generation propheticum lasts 50 years, and the king said that the generation that begins to see all these things from the conclusion of the Gentile times regarding the administration of Jerusalem, it wouldn't happen. It means that from now on, when Jerusalem is no longer dominated by the Gentiles, the 50 will begin to be fulfilled, which is the generation that is passing. So, we already saw in the previous lecture that this took place in 1908. What happened after all, Che? The state of Israel declared Jerusalem the unique, indivisible, and eternal capital. Very well. I want you to write down that year, November of 1988, in your prophetic memories regarding the status of Jerusalem. The year 1980 is significant because it was when the state of Israel enacted the Jerusalem law that officially declares Jerusalem as the indivisible capital of the Jewish people, the rumble of the circle of the hump, the sole capital of the people of Israel. Before knowing burns with loneliness, Jerusalem was divided between Israel, which controlled the western part of the city, and Jordan, which controlled the eastern part, including the old city before the 6-Day War of 1967. As a result of that 6-Day War, Israel was able to reclaim the eastern part from Jerusalem, which was in the hands of the Gentiles. In this case, Jordan. What happened? Of course, that threw the world off, created a worldwide stir. Many countries saw this action as illegal, not recognizing it the right of Israel, having their historic capital, Jerusalem, back in their hands, and they are going to be in control. In other words, the United Nations, whose main sign is right here behind us. The United Nations prefer for Jerusalem to be in their hands under the administration of the nations. And let it be the United Nations, not the Jewish people. It is not for the people of Israel or the United Nations to decide the future of Jerusalem. Of course, Israel rejected that. And that brings us to the Jerusalem Law of 1980, when Israel declares its sovereignty over the whole city. We have to read, including the eastern part, meaning we have the entirety of the citizenship in our hand, the total administration of the city of the past. This action will declare hope. In 1980, it was widely condemned by the international community. It reached the Security Council. Listen to this. The United Nations Security Council to propose the famous Resolution 478. That's another one we have to remember, because at any moment you'll have to use it. United Nations Resolution 181, Security Council Resolution 478. Hold on. The United Nations has many organizations. The two most important ones are the General Assembly, which meets once a year here in Manhattan. We need to adapt the building here a few blocks south, basically, and the advice of zero. This is split coast. The decisions of the United Nations General Assembly, are they important? Short animatroop. They are respectable, but they are not binding on any member country of the action. However, the decisions of the Security Council are binding for all member nations of the country. And I go back to what I've mentioned. If the Security Council of the Islamic nation determines that Jerusalem cannot be under Jewish administration, but under the administration of the United Nations, Israel has to hand over Jerusalem to the Israel Reserve. If he doesn't do it, the United Nations reserves the right to stop Israel and use force. That's how it is with the decisions of this important body called the United Nations Security Council. Well, it brought to the United Nations Security Council the resolution 478 declaring the law of Jerusalem is established by the Jewish state is null and void. And this proposal established that the legislative measures and administrative measures taken by Israel to alter the character and status which the holy city of Jerusalem had had until then were illegal and could not be recognized. How many understand the seriousness of what's happening here? Keep stalling. Resolution 478 could never be binding. That didn't go through. Why? Because HASHEM had a card hidden under the blanket. Yesterday I had a card, like the Mexican comedian says, they didn't count on my wit. make sure to plan a move. This is convivita, and that move is called Jewish State. And raw it. United States, primarily due to China, Russia, and England, has the power to veto the resolutions proposed in the Security Council environment. And when they brought that and went to vote, the United States raised its little hand and said, I veto that. No bill. It does not go. Consequently, that proposal 478, it doesn't affect Israel because that decision was vetoed by the United States. No. Will everyone love Hachinga today? Or not? Not. Because Raja Singha is the most wicked project in the world. Crazy people are tempted by that. When they saw it didn't prosper, the United Nations urged all nations not to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and let us know, all the embassies, all the consulates, all the diplomatic representations. If there are any, and move them to make it look so. There is no Jerusalem. Why? Because moving your embassy to Jerusalem or keeping it in Jerusalem would be giving a tactical acknowledgement of the 1980 Jerusalem law, by which Israel declares the holy city of Lusole their historical capital, the same city that King David established as his capital 3,000 years ago, has endured. That is why you find yourself in many countries today that have their embassies in Tel Aviv and not in Jerusalem. However, I have some good news for you. The good news is that things are starting to change. And every day, more countries have moved or have promised to move their embassies from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And among those countries, we can count the United States. A round of applause for the United States. So see you later, Honduras, and the next Nodura. It was not Guinea. The next Nodura, Malani. A big round of applause for Malani. And now, the promise of the newly elected president of Argentina, Javier Milei, who personally promised my wife, the rabbinite, and me in a meeting we had. For a meeting that was destined by heaven here in New York before becoming president. We're meeting here in New York with him. I told him, you're going to be the next president from Argentina, but promise me something, that when you are sitting in the presidential chair, you will remember Israel, and you will move the Argentine embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We want the same. I promise you I'll do it. I promise you I'll do it. Subscribe. I have the photos and the entire historical account of that encounter with him here in Jerusalem, and he has reiterated this on an international level. In fact, he was recently in Jerusalem. I was at the wall and repeated it in front of our authorities. In other words, my friends, you are seeing it with your own eyes. What is happening with the holy city of Jerusalem? Well, this was in 1980. When Israel establishes the law of Jerusalem, it affirms Jerusalem as its eternal capital, the same city that King David established
as the capital 3,000 years ago. Thinking about that date, 1980, we have seen that according to the prophetic textual precedent, turn towards me. And starting from the 200 years of bondage we experienced in Egypt, 50 years is the time of a prophetic generation in terms of living retention. Rivi said that the generation that started to see these things would not pass away until the sign of the Son of Man appears first, meaning the revelation that takes us to David over the skies of Jerusalem. All right, here we go. If we add 50 years to 1980, what has happened in English? On the 23rd, they were kidnapped. To 1980, that gives us 1023. So, where are you coming from? Starting from the year 2030, all required events will unfold for the revelation of Monsieur Ben Ali. Rupert, doesn't it catch your attention that the United Nations has also set an agenda for the year 2030? What is Agenda 23? And what will happen from the 23rd? Well, according to the United Nations, according to the Gentile nations, the year 2030, it will be the year when the entire world reset project will be implemented, supposedly to save the planet and to save humanity. The 2030 people, of those 2030 people, it is part of a partial project towards a new world order that promises a sustainable development system for everyone, eliminating hunger across the entire earth, eliminating poverty from the entire world, bringing new times and a new era, a new world of equality and global unification. Let's refresh our memory a bit. I will mention the goals of the United Nations 2030 agenda. Oh no, eliminate poverty in the world. 2, fight against poverty. And that's all. For goodbye. 3, establish a healthcare system. Good morning. May everyone have sure of knowing. 4th, ensure equal education for all people. Everyone should have access to education. Ensure gender equality. Provide clean drinking water for everyone. Ensure sustainable access to energy sources for everywhere. Promote economic development and employment for everyone across the nation. Nothing simple that everyone have work. Provide infrastructure, provide sustainable industrialization for all the nations of the earth, meaning technology exchange, bringing everyone together on the same technological platform. Therefore, the next step is to reduce inequality between nations. There shouldn't be first world countries, second world countries, third world countries, or fourth, fifth, and underground countries. to reduce the inequality between all nations, ensure security in every country on earth, so you don't have to walk around with bars outside. You can walk in peace in any street in the world, in any neighborhood you enter. You can move around safely. Don't let them attack you. Don't let them throw you down. That's all. Manage the global consumption of goods. Reduce the impact of climate change worldwide. Restore, protect, and promote the sustainable use of our ecosystem. Promote just societies and global access to justice, and finally revitalize international partnerships so that together we can have comprehensive and sustainable development and growth. That's all for today, friends. That's the G933. To have everything in its place. And to reach this goal, the United Nations has set the year 2023. Top military official. How many are with me? No. How many are with me up to here? Well, taste it. Jerusalem is declared the sole, indivisible, alternative capital of Israel in 2017. A prophetic Abrahamic generation of redemption, already alive, is 50 years. 50 years after 1980 also takes us to 2030. No, in 2030 it's going to be mainstream. A big clash between God's agenda and the United Nations agenda. Oh no. And in that year, two unique prophetic moments coincide. On the one hand, probably the generation that will not pass begins. And on the other hand, the countdown to a world government with all these United Nations proposals, echándole. Everything needs to be in line and in position for 2003. And there's another one. Now they give me 1,000 Pentecopas. How much time do we have left? How much time do we have left of 2024 from 2003? 6 years. Yes, Satan has 6 years left. Amen. What? He has 6 years left. Stop. That's what the scripture says. That is hurrying to establish it, because it sees there's little time left. And since you see he has little time left, he has to shoot this whole project and set it up no matter what. Make yourself comfortable to show that it's possible to govern without God, that peace and prosperity can be achieved without God. And man without God can turn this earth into a paradise. That's what everyone is saying. That's what they are doing at the Economic Forum, World Cup. And logically to achieve this, the schedule will have to do something we will have to make an important move. Just note, not just that, a decisive move. Without that move, he won't have the time to achieve his purpose. And this move is so decisive and affects all of us so closely that everyone needs to know what it's about. And that's what we'll see in the next class. You didn't tell me, right? Alright, let's move to the next class. Let's take a break. Change positions, stretch your legs, drink water, and we'll be back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes and we're back.
Shalom.